Praise God. Hallelujah. I welcome you all to Flaming Sword Global Ministries School of Influence monthly program. And today is the second edition in the month of March. We've been discussing on reforming, on our theme, reforming the world's education system. Today's edition we'll be talking about reformers. Now, why are we talking about reformers? Well, we need to understand over the years how education arrived at this level. Who were the prominent figures that influenced education in one way or the other? Right from the time of Adam, from the time man fell, we have been as humans, we have been looking for the perfect education system that would reshape man in the perfect state to function well in the society, to interact with his fellow humans, to function as a human being, to excel in any aspect, any field. So we've been looking for that perfect state, that perfect system. We haven't arrived there, but arriving at the perfect state might be a bit far-fetched pertaining to the nature of man. But we can come up with a better system. As Christian educators that would shape children in the will of God. So, we're talking on reformers. So, who is a reformer? Now, in our previous class, in our previous edition, we talked about reforming education system and the likes. Talk about reforming being a self-improvement or to make changes for improvement in order to correct something, to correct a defect, or an error in the system. And who is a reformer? A reformer is someone who advocates reform. So the person comes up with an idea in order to correct an error in the system. Now, in order to arrive at a better system for the education in the world, we need to understand who are those that have influenced it in the past. How did they do it? What was their focus on? What was their personal ideology? What was their limitations in the system they came up with? So we need to go back in history as far back as 500 BC or so, way far back to the time of Confucius, Socrates, Plato, and the likes. And so we begin. Now I would split the history into various categories. We have number one, ancient beginnings. Ancient beginnings started from beginning of time up to 476 AD. 476 AD or CE. Take note, AD is a system of measurements for historical time that was used in the past. Currently, I think they use 476. They use CE, that is BCE or CE. BCE is before Common Era. CE is Common Era. CE is right from the time of our Lord, the birth of Christ, down to this current time. And BCE is beginning beginning of time to the point, to the time he was to his birth. So we start with so we have ancient beginnings of that's beginning of time up to 476 AD. We have medieval times, that is from 476 AD to 1450 AD. We have the Renaissance and Enlightenment era, that is from 1450 AD to 1800 AD. We also have the Industrial Revolution from 1800 AD to 1900 AD, and then we now have the 20th and 21st centuries. 20th and 21st centuries. So in ancient beginnings, we have prominent figures such as Confucius, Socrates, Plato, Mencius, amongst many. I picked a few. Then we have the medieval times. We have the Benedict of Nursia, Thomas Aquinas, Abelard, and Islamic scholars. The Renaissance and Enlightenment era, we have Desiderius Erasmus, Michel de Montaigne, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We also have an Industrial Revolution, Horace Mann, Frederick Froebel, John Dewey, Lev Vygotsky. The 20th and 21st centuries, we have Maria Montessori, Howard Gardner, Alan Kay, Paulo Freire, and B.F. Skinner, amongst many. So these are just few of prominent figures in history that I have selected to discuss on. And we will be starting with Confucius. Yeah. So the ancient beginning started right from Adam's time up to 476 AD or 476 CE. And before Confucius, we had civilizations that came up with different education system. We have the Babylonians, right from the time of Noah, and Nimrod, who were mentioned in the Bible. So we have various civilizations that came up right before just in different eras before Confucius, but we will not be diving into those. We also have the Sumerians, we have the Incans. So these civilizations actually have their own various education system. But one thing you'll notice about them is at some point either the civilizations ended or they were transformed into something, they broke up into smaller fractions. So most of the education system, I would say, ended a bit. So, but we'll be starting with Confucius. Now, Confucius was a revered Chinese philosopher. His time was between 551 to 479 BC. 479 BC. So that is 551 years to 479 years before Christ, or before Common Era. We'll be looking at Confucius and his educational philosophy. He was a revered Chinese philosopher, lived during Spring and autumn period. His teachings, compiled in the Analects, laid the foundation for Confucianism, a philosophy that has profoundly influenced Chinese society and education for over 2 millennia. Let us delve into his ideas now. So, what are the things Confucius focused on? Number one, okay, he focused on moral character and social harmony. So, Confucius believed that education would not just be about acquiring knowledge, but also about cultivating ethical individuals who could contribute to a harmonious society. He also laid emphasis on values like filial piety, which is respect for parents and elders. He also laid emphasis on values like Ren, which is benevolence, and Li, which is ritual propriety. So his education, his own ideology, aimed to instill such values and prepare individuals for their roles in society, whether as rulers, officials, or ordinary citizens. One ideal in Confucius' ideology was the Junzi, it's called the Junzi, which is the ideal gentleman. So Confucius' ideal educated person was the Junzi, a well-rounded individual who embodied moral character, intellectual ability, and social graces. So he's focusing more on the building of a person's character, the thinking capacity, and the social interactions, social relationship of the person. So education in Confucius' time focused on developing these qualities through various disciplines, including literature, studying the classical texts to understand history, ethics, and proper conduct. We also have music, cultivating refinement and self-discipline. We have archery, developing focus and self-control. And we have rituals, learning proper etiquette and ceremonies in the society. So you can see the focus here was all on the intellectual aspects, the emotional, the social, and man's functionality in the society. He also focused on the role of the teacher. So Confucius emphasized the importance of teachers as role models who embodied the values they sought to instill in their students. The teacher-student relationship was revered. The students expected to show respect and deference to their teacher. Let's look at some of the impacts. So the role of teachers in the society were seen as prominent, important figures, like role models to children that they could emulate. And teachers were revered, were meant to have to portray an outstanding personality in the society. Now, impacts. What was the impact of Confucius' ideology on education? Well, his ideas laid the groundwork for the Chinese civil service examination system. So, I can say how examination started, where they gave students tests that they should pass in order to be certified. So for centuries, Chinese officials, their governments based their knowledge on the philosophy of Confucius, Confucian philosophy and its classics. Then emphasis was also on moral education, and it continues to influence the educational practice in China and some other East Asian countries. Now, what were the criticisms on this ideology? Some critics argue that Confucianism's emphasis on social order and hierarchy stifled creativity and critical thinking. So, due to the fact that it's all on moral, on social, morals, and intellectuals, some critics argued it might have stifled creativity, critical thinking. Another critique on his education system was that his Confucius ideals were often elitist, meaning they were only for the elites. Only the elites could have easy access to them. So this limited access to education for the lower classes. So if you probably were not born in a noble family or something like that, you probably would not even have access to education. So this is a drawback. These are some of the limitations to Confucius' ideal, the education system. But still, his ideas still continue to influence educational philosophies worldwide, most especially in China and East Asian countries. There are some parts of his ideologies that are still emulated in the education system. One thing you will know the Chinese for is the level of discipline, the level of discipline they have in their society, and their cultural and traditional ethics. We'll move on. Moving on to Socrates. Socrates, between the time of 470 years to 399 years before Christ. Socrates is from Greek, was a prominent figure in ancient Greek philosophy. He didn't establish a formal school of thought, but what he did was he engaged in lively dialogues and debated in the Athenian marketplace. So what he would do, or what he was mostly known for, was that he had this constant debates. He would debate on matters as political, philosophical, social, what would I say, cosmological, spiritual, even at some point. So he mostly challenged conventional thinking and sparked intellectual curiosity amongst people, amongst his students also. His own approach was known as the Socratic method, and it still continues to have a profound effect on education today. Now, what was his method? Let us look at his method. First one is questioning and critical thinking. So, at the heart of the Socratic method lies the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Through questioning, we will always ask questions a lot. At some point, his own main goal was not that you would come up with an answer, but that through the process of questioning the norms, questioning what we perceive, questioning everything we know, the person would arrive at a better understanding than when he started. Now, at the heart of Socratic method lies the relentless pursuit of knowledge through questioning. Socrates wouldn't provide answers, but instead asked probing questions. forced the students to examine their own assumptions and beliefs. So they would always question their beliefs system. Always ask probing questions, get people to think about their norms, about their traditions. Another aspect of it is dialogue and debate. So in Socrates' method, learning mostly occurred through active dialogue and debates. There wasn't really a formal system. It was mostly through dialogue and debates and challenging the ideas, the norms, exposing inconsistencies and encouraging the students to refine their arguments. Another aspect is self-examination. Now, the ultimate goal of the Socratic method wasn't to arrive at a definitive answer, but to cultivate self-awareness and critical thinking skills. By questioning their own beliefs, students could gain deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. So Socrates believed that true knowledge came not from passive learning but from active inquiry and the examination of ideas. So his ideal learning was that we should question things, question what we believe, question the norms in society. We might not arrive at a final answer, but we'll question everything we know and try to evaluate or remove inconsistencies, things like that. So he challenged the idea that knowledge was possessed by select few and argued that the potential for wisdom resided within everyone. So that's thinking, that's saying or notion that only a selected few could possess knowledge or ideas. He challenged it that wasn't true, that potential for wisdom actually resided within everyone, and that is true. No man is an island with knowledge, and so everyone, so far as they have the ability to think, has that ability or the potential for wisdom. So what was his impact on education? He became a cornerstone for educational pedagogy, promoting critical thinking, active learning, and the ability to analyze arguments effectively. It is used across various disciplines, encouraging students to question assumptions, evaluate evidence, and construct sound arguments. Now, what were the critics on his system, on this education ideology? Well, some argued that the Socratic method may have been overly critical, meaning it was too critical, and it could have probably led students to doubt everything without ever reaching any conclusion. So it was more or less like we were questioning everything without actually arriving at an answer. And honestly, it will lead to a point where you will not believe anything. So yeah, at some point you would question and question and question until you get to a point you will not even want to believe anything anymore. And another thing about it was that it was also regarded as something time consuming, because you would question and think on things, on matters, on concepts, on ideas, ideologies, on philosophies. I also think it was that it required a skilled facilitator. guide the this discussion effectively. So if everyone is of less knowledge and they were all questioning and all of that, might not really arrive at a solid standpoint. So those were some of the criticisms on the Socratic method. Besides that, the emphasis on questioning and critical thinking still remains a crucial aspect in the pursuit of knowledge, and it has influenced the educational system over the years, fostering a spirit of inquiry and intellectual curiosity in classrooms around the world. Another prominent figure we have in the ancient beginnings era is Plato. Plato's time was from 428 years to 348 years before Christ. So let's look at his educational philosophy. So Plato was a student of Socrates, was a very prolific philosopher who founded the academy in Athens. He was also considered as one of the first institutions of higher learning in the Western world. His ideas on education, outlined in dialogues like The Republic, some of the books he wrote, aimed to cultivate philosopher kings who could lead society justly. So you see here that his own philosophy was to build people that would lead, that can lead societies, that can lead large amounts of people, that can lead countries, lead nations, lead kingdoms, empires. So his idea was to build the philosopher king, someone who was a master thinking. Now let us consider some other details in Plato's educational philosophy. We have education for the ideal state. So Plato believed that education played a critical role in creating a just and harmonious society. So if everyone have access to education, then there is equity, there is harmony, and there is justice. If everyone is educated, if everyone has access to education, so he saw education as a leveling ground for everybody in the society. He envisioned a three-tiered educational system designed to identify and train individuals with the potential to become philosopher kings, that is, wise and virtuous rulers. Now, the stages of education in his own educational philosophy, we have the elementary education, right from the young, the kindergartens, the younger children, up to age 18. So the elementary education is from birth to age 18, and it focused on physical education, music, literature, and basic arithmetic. So to develop well-rounded individual with a sense of discipline and citizenship. So the elementary education was based on instilling sense of discipline and what's it called? Ideas, or let me say, imbibing citizens into citizenship morals. I don't know, I'm looking for the right word to use here. Just let me say, it was mostly focused on how to breed or how to bring up children with sense of discipline, and also in a way they act as useful members of the society, as citizens. The second stage is higher education, that was from age 20 to age 30. And in this stage, selected students receive advanced training in mathematics, science, philosophy, and dialects. Dialect is the heart of logical reasoning. So this stage aims to develop critical thinking and the ability to discern truth from falsehood. If you recall, he was a student of Socrates, and Socrates was all about questioning norms. His own was to develop your critical thinking and the ability for you to discern true and false, what is true and what is false. In our current days, there is what we call the objective truths and subjective truths. So the objective truths are like absolute truths. So they are things that it is known everywhere, it is accepted everywhere. I think truths like the fundamental human rights, I can call that also truth. So it is accepted everywhere. The right to life. And then when we talk about subjective truths, that's where we have different varying truths. I have my truth, you have your truth, he has his truth, she has her truth, and all of that. So I don't know how we arrived at that point, but yeah, that's what we have. And the third stage is training for philosopher kings. Training for philosopher kings. And this is from age 30 to age 50. A select few will undergo rigorous philosophical training, studying metaphysics, that is the nature of reality, and ethics. So this stage was aimed to cultivate wisdom and the ability to rule justly. So he focused mostly on in this aspect on gaining wisdom and ability to rule justly. Gaining wisdom. His educational philosophy laid the emphasis on reasoning and dialect. Plato believed that reason, not just blind faith or tradition, should guide human behavior. Education focused on developing students' reasoning abilities through dialect, the act of logical debate and argumentation. So it was not just about having a dialogue with someone, it's also developing high reasoning capabilities, so we can arrive at what is true and what is false. In his philosophy, we also have the role of the teacher. The teacher were seen as guides who facilitated learning and challenged student ideas. Plato emphasized the importance of teaching, of teachers embodying the virtues they sought to instill in their students. So where we have people teaching and not practicing what they teach. So that was not the case of Plato's educational philosophy. So he emphasized that saying, practice what you teach. Now, what are his impacts on education? The impact of his philosophy on education. Plato's idea laid the groundwork for Western educational traditions, emphasizing critical thinking, reasoning, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. Another impact he had was the concept of a tiered educational system. Specialized training influenced later development in secondary education and higher education. Let us look at some critics on his philosophy. So Plato's system has been criticized for being elitist, excluding the majority of the population from higher education. At some point when these people are trained and they have gained this sort of high status, it will be like the society would fall into a segregated, or let me say splitted form, where we have the high elites and the lower society, lower part of the society. So the ideology, the philosophy was criticized because only the elites could actually get access, and majority could not. Another critics on his philosophy was that his emphasis on reasoning was seen as devaluing other forms of knowledge and human experience like arts and emotions. We're not talking about inspirations, revelations, and all of that. And now we'll be moving to another era. Moving to another era, which is the medieval times. Medieval times. That is 476 years AD to 1450 AD. We have Benedict of Nursia, Thomas Aquinas, Abelard, and the Islamic scholars. Because of our time, I will only take few of them. I'll take Thomas Aquinas. So, who was Thomas? What was his philosophy, Thomas Aquinas? Well, he was a Dominican friar and doctor of the church. So Thomas Aquinas' era was from 1225 to 1274 AD, and he stood as a giant in the medieval philosophy and theology. His work, particularly his monumental Summa Theologica, profoundly impacted education during the Middle Ages. So let's delve into his ideas and influence. So one of Thomas Aquinas' ideas was to reconcile faith and reasoning. He sought to reconcile faith and reasoning, arguing that the both could lead to truth. He believed that studying the natural world and classical philosophy could deepen one's understanding of God's creation. Another idea was that he wanted to synthesize Aristotle and Christianity. He was a keen student of Aristotle, so Aquinas integrated Aristotelian thought with Christian theology. He saw reason as compatible with faith and believed studying the natural world would reveal God's design. So from here you would see that there were two things here: reason and faith. Reason and faith. In this time there were these misconceptions that faith does not have let me see, does not have a solid proof. But one thing is, God does not want blind faith. Even all through the Bible, we would see evidence of things God did and people that God used. So our faith is not actually blind faith. It is faith with evidence. Faith with evidence. So Aquinas was all about bridging those two together and seeing that we could actually find truth from the two, that is reason and faith, logic and faith. Another idea was education for the whole person. Aquinas advocated for a comprehensive education that nurtured both the intellect and the soul. The intellect and the soul. You can see here he focused on two aspects: the mind and the emotions. The mind and the emotions. So this included studying religious texts, philosophy, science, and the arts. The goal was to cultivate well-rounded individuals with a deep understanding of faith, of reason, and the world around them. So his own ideologies were to have well-rounded individuals that understood what faith is, what reason is, and the world they live in. He also emphasized the importance of teachers as guides who will lead students to knowledge through reason and discussion. He believed teachers should be knowledgeable and virtuous role models. So, what was his impact on education? His educational philosophy laid emphasis on reason and the importance of classical tradition, which laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and Enlightenment era. His framework for integrating faith and reason continues to be debated in educational philosophy today. Yeah, there have been countless debates over the years on whether faith and reasoning should be together, should be bridged together. Countless debates on that. Another impact was on natural law. His work on natural law continues to influence legal and political thought. Some critics. So, what were the criticism on Aquinas? Some argue that Aquinas' emphasis on reason placed limitations on faith, and that his focus on classical texts limited exploration of new ideas. So they thought that because of the classical text, there were limitations on exploring new ideas. His ideas primarily influenced university education with limited impact primary education for the masses. Moving on to the next era, we have the Renaissance era, the Renaissance and Enlightenment era. A prominent figure I would pick is John Locke from England. His era was from 1632 to 1704 AD. John Locke. And so the Renaissance and Enlightenment era was an era of should I say where men started to be enlightened. That is, before those eras we had wars, people fighting to claim territories and the likes. But the Enlightenment era brought about a stop to some of these ideologies.
So, John Locke was a prominent English philosopher. Significantly influenced educational thinking during the Enlightenment era. So, his ideas were based on empiricism, knowledge gained through experience and sensation, and they left a lasting mark on educational philosophies. Let's delve deeper into his contributions. Okay, some his educational philosophy was based on empiricism and the mind as a blank slate. So Locke challenged the notion of innate ideas, arguing that the mind is born a blank state and knowledge is acquired through sensory experiences. This emphasis on experience had significant implications for education. Another idea in this philosophy was learning through observation and experimentation. Locke believed education should focus on fostering students' ability to observe the world around them, ask questions, and conduct experiments. So this hands-on approach aimed to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Another one was the importance of reason. So Locke, widely emphasized on experience, he also valued reason and logic. So reason, logic, together with our experience, was the basis of his educational philosophy. He believed education should equip students with the skills to analyze information, draw conclusions, and form reasoned judgments. What were the impacts of his educational philosophy on education itself? We have the rise of inquiry-based learning. So his ideas laid the groundwork for inquiry-based learning, a sort of student-centered approach where students' activity investigate topics and they solve problems. So you have where the particular, if maybe for a particular concept, you will investigate and then solve these problems. This method actually encourages curiosity, critical thinking, and a deeper understanding of concepts. Another impact on education was the importance of practical skills. So he advocated for an education that included practical skills hands-on alongside theoretical knowledge. So it's not just about having the theoretical knowledge alone, it's about both theoretical with practical. So he believed education should prepare students not just for academic pursuits but also for navigating the complexities of life. Another impact was the focus on sciences. So his emphasis on observation and experimentation fueled a growing interest in the natural sciences during the Enlightenment era. It's during this period of time we have various kinds of invention, and should I say advancement. That's where we have scientists coming up with different kinds of theories and inventions and ideologies and philosophies and whatnot. So he was part of the proponents that fueled such growth. Educational practices during got due to these impacts began to incorporate scientific exploration and inquiry. So I can say part of his educational philosophy led to this experimentation, observation we have in scientific studies. What were the criticisms on his educational philosophy? First is the value in intuition and imagination. So some argued that Locke overemphasized on empiricism, and this undervalued the role of intuition, creativity, and imagination in learning. experimentation is all about what you are seeing through your senses, feeling through your senses, smelling through your senses, hearing through your senses, and all of that. Those are mostly based on sensory experiences. And yeah, those another criticism was the limited scope of experience. The limited scope of experience. So, access to experiences can vary depending on social background. So, this brought up the questions about equity in education based solely on experience. So, I think it's from here we started having where you get in the job requirement, they ask you for 4 years of experience, 5 years of experience, wanting to know that yes, you actually have an experience on related subject or related concepts. So some argue that this access to experience can vary depending on social background, because obviously everyone will not born equal, so will not have the same access to the same kind of experiences. And so some people that had favorable experiences might have an upper edge against others who did not have this. And if you were born in places whereby you did not have the experience, maybe in a community where the educational system is not really solid, you didn't have the you did not have access to good facilities, equipment, and experimentations and labs and all of that. So that experience is not actually there, and due to that lack of experience, you might not be able to have the opportunity to access higher education or standard or quality education. So some critics criticized his educational philosophy on that. Another proponent, because of our time, I would move to another era, which is the Industrial Revolution era. The Industrial Revolution era. Industrial Revolution era, and I will be talking on John Dewey. Because of our time, I'll be talking on John Dewey. And in the Industrial Revolution era is where the educational system was developed on the educational system was developed on the Industrial Revolution era, on the foundations of the Industrial Revolution era, where we have the education system designed in a way to train students to be workers in the industry. Train students to be workers in the industry, and that was more or less like streamlining everyone's streamlining creativity, streamlining individuality. So it wasn't at the time. I would say it's work, but it benefited only the elites, especially I'm talking about capitalism now. So only those that have what's called maybe like the owners of the company or the industry that would actually benefit better. And this raised a lot of controversial questions over time, where we have workers who were working and they were not earning well, they were not living standard, they were not living a standard quality of life and all of that. Yeah. So moving to the industrial revolution era, I'll be talking on John Dewey. His time was from 1859 to 1952 AD. So let's look at some of his educational philosophy. He was an American philosopher, a psychologist, and an educational reformer. He stood out for his influential ideas on progressive education. He challenged traditional teacher-centered methods and advocated for an approach that fostered critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and learning through experience. His educational philosophy, I could call it progressive education, and it was based on one, learning by doing. So he believed that students learn best by actively engaging with their environment and solving problems, more or less like a practical aspect here, having an hands-on experience with the concepts in education. He advocated for hands-on, project-based approach to learning that connected classroom activities to real-world experiences. So his learning by doing philosophy was, instead of just taking in the theoretical aspect alone, you take in learning by also practicalizing what you are learning. You practicalize it. That would encourage, that would enhance better learning. Another emphasis was focus on critical thinking also. He emphasized the importance of critical thinking and inquiry in education. You can see this is some aspect of the previous prominent figures we talked about. Importance of critical thinking and inquiry in education. He believed that students should not just passively absorb information but learn to question, analyze, and form their own conclusion. You don't just take things regurgitatively. Learn to question the norms, analyze, and form your own conclusion. So you don't just take it in the way it is given to you. Another emphasis was education for democracy. Dewey viewed education as a crucial tool for preparing students for active participation in a democratic society. So, through education, everyone could have access to democracy, could have access to being voted or to vote, and all the likes. He envisioned schools as miniature democracies where students would learn to collaborate, solve problems, and make informed decisions. If you look at this very well, every stage of the human life, from the infant stage up to, let me say, the university level, you will find a form of expression of democracy. Even in the university, we have sort of a democratic society also. So it's from, we are like we say in Nigeria, corruption is almost in all facets of life, all stages of life, even in the family, church, in the education system, and all the likes. Not just in the political system alone. Not just in the political system alone. It is in almost all the facets of life now. Now, he viewed democracy as like a leveling ground, as small democratic institutions. He viewed schools as small democratic institutions where students can learn together, solve problems together, and make informed decisions together. That would be at the interest of the group of people or society or people that come together. So, what are the impacts of the educational philosophy? The impact of the educational philosophy, we have the rise of progressive education movement. Dewey's ideas fueled the progressive education movement in the early 20th century. This movement emphasized student-centered learning, interdisciplinary approaches, and fostering a love of learning. Another was the focus on collaboration and social skills. So, Dewey's progressive education philosophy highlighted the importance of collaboration, communication, and social skills alongside academic knowledge. You can now see a sort of balance coming up as time progresses. Collaboration, communication, and social skills alongside your academic knowledge. Another impact on education which he had was curriculum reform. So Dewey's ideas influenced the curriculum reforms that incorporated project-based learning, real-world applications of knowledge, and student inquiry. So his educational philosophy brought about a reform where practical applications, real-world applications, were brought into the curriculum of the education system. Some criticisms and considerations. So we have challenges with standardization. Now, the emphasis on individualized learning and student-centered activities can make standardized testing and assessment more challenging. Why? Because then you have one test for every different kind of intelligence, different kind of mentality, different kind of ideology. Everybody is different. Everyone is unique. And if you have a standardized test, you're more or less like streamlining everybody into one particular mode. So those were some of the considerations on his ideology. We have also teacher training and resources. Now, implementing this progressive education effectively requires well-trained teachers and sufficient resources, which may not always be available for societies whereby it's still developing or they are underdeveloped. You would have, for such kind of educational philosophy to thrive there, you need teachers who have been trained, and you need resources also, which is, like I said, may not always be available in societies like that. We also another considerations we see there is balancing individual needs and core skills. So there can be a tension between catering to individual interests and ensuring students develop the necessary foundational academic skills. So there is what the individual interest is, and there is the foundational basics, the foundational knowledge, skills that the individual should have. So there can be some friction between those two. There can be some friction between those two. That's another consideration on John Dewey's educational philosophy. So, despite the limitations, there have been his emphasis on critical thinking, learning by doing, and preparing students for democratic participation continues to resonate with the education system today. We still find it expressing itself in the education system in our time. And then we will move on to the 20th and 21st century. That's the 20th and 21st century. And there we have prominent figures like Maria Montessori, Howard Gardner, Alan Kay, Paulo Freire, and B.F. Skinner. I would pick Maria Montessori. I'm very sure we've all heard of the name Montessori schools. So the name Montessori schools actually came from Maria Montessori, was the um, founder, or let me say the developer of such type of schools. So our own educational philosophy can tag it as championing child-centered learning. Championing child-centered learning. And Maria Montessori, she challenged traditional educational practices of the early 20th century with an innovative approach. Her emphasis were on self-directed learning, hands-on exploration, and respect for the natural development of a child. And this continues actually to influence the educational philosophies worldwide, because we have schools like that in Nigeria, all over the world, where you hear about something Montessori schools, something Montessori schools, like that, British Montessori schools and all of that. So she was someone that influenced, that brought about such reformation. So what is the Montessori method? First one, we have prepared learning environment. So she believed classrooms should be stimulating and well equipped with age-appropriate materials that encourage exploration and discovery. So, I mean, your environment should be stimulating. You know those classes where you go to and everywhere is designed to entice, let me see. So the environment is designed in a way, I don't know if you have been to schools whereby there are various kinds of designs on the wall and the likes to incite, to bring about such kind of feeling in the minds of students that in the right kind of environment for learning. I think part of it is what brought about this idea of all these calendars where you have different maybe parts of the body and whatnot. You find them in classes like that. And then another idea in the Montessori method is self-directed learning. So this was central to Montessori method, and the idea was that children learn best when they are actively engaged and allowed to follow their own interests within the prepared environment. The teachers act as a guide, facilitating the learning rather than strictly directing it. So in this kind of process or method, teachers will act as guides to help the students in their interest, to guide them along the process. Another idea is a sensorial development. So Montessori, she emphasized the importance of sensory experiences in early learning. Sensory experiences in early learning. Our classrooms incorporate specialized materials that engage the senses and help children develop cognitive skills. So the classrooms will be designed in a way to engage the senses of the child and help that child develop cognitive abilities. Another idea is the respect for individual development. So the Montessori approach acknowledges that children develop at their own. The Montessori approach acknowledges that children develop at their own pace. So teachers observe and cater to individual needs, creating a supportive environment for each child to flourish. So, like it said, just act as a guide, helping the children as they grow and as they learn. They create that conducive, supportive environment for each child to flourish. So, what were the impacts of our educational philosophy on education? We have the growth of the Montessori schools. Montessori ideas led to the establishment of Montessori schools around the world. You would have seen schools that have the name Montessori attached to their name. They are following the ideas of Montessori. These schools continue to provide a unique learning experience based on her philosophy. Another impact she had was the influence on early childhood education. So, Montessori's method emphasized on hands-on learning, exploration, and respect for individual development, which has influenced the broader early childhood educational practices. So, the philosophy, our philosophy was on respecting individual development, and based on that, educational practices that support that were created in Montessori schools. Another emphasis was the focus on the whole child, the whole child. So similar to Rousseau's other prominent figure, we didn't touch him, but similar to his own idea, Rousseau, Montessori acknowledged the importance of fostering not just cognitive skills but also social, emotional, and physical development in children. So it was not just only on the cognitive abilities. There has to be the social ability, social relationship between peers, society, and all the likes, and the emotional and the physical development in children. Now, I want to focus on, I want to talk on the criticisms and considerations. Criticisms. I fail to pronounce that word rightly every time. The criticisms and considerations. So, number one is the cost and accessibility. So, Montessori schools are often private institutions. So, and this raises concern about accessibility and equity in education. Private schools cannot always be accessed by everyone because, it's private. So, it's only for those who can actually afford it, I think. Then another point there is structure and discipline. So the critics argue that the Montessori method might lack a clear structure and focus on discipline, potentially challenging some students. So, just like I said, that the teachers will serve as a guide, not necessarily imposing on them any strict method or idea. So the critics argue that this might cause a lack of structure and lack of discipline among students. Another point there is limited scope for all settings. So the ideal Montessori classroom requires specialized materials and a low student-teacher ratio, which might not be feasible in all educational settings. So in Montessori schools, we do not have we do not have situations like where there will be like 60 students in a class or 100 students in the class. So the student-teacher ratio is quite low, whereby the teacher is able to cater to the needs of the children. If you have cases whereby there are 100 students in a class or 60 students in a class, it's quite difficult for the teacher to pay attention to every child. So that was so the critics were like, well, it is not in all educational settings that our own educational philosophy can work, because obviously where we have limited amounts of schools but a large population, you cannot practice such idea. And so we have that. The 20th and 21st century, we have that, the Montessori. So from all these prominent figures and their ideologies and educational philosophies, you would notice one thing. You would notice one thing there. There is a focus on the should I say the human aspect. There's a focus on the human aspect. Focus on the human aspect. You won't find there's less attention paid to the spiritual aspect of man. I think the only prominent figure who paid a little bit of attention to the spiritual aspect was Aquinas. And that's one thing that you will see lacking in apart from the criticized ones. Apart from their criticisms, you would find that also that there is less emphasis on the spiritual development of man. Less emphasis on the spiritual development. And I think the education system should cater quite a bit for it also. Should cater for the spiritual aspect, the physical, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, every aspect. So these are the prominent figures we have throughout history that have shaped the education system to what we have today. We have Montessori schools, and we have John Locke, we have Confucius in China. So part of their ideologies and philosophies were like the parts that were, let me say, good in a sense, were selected. You find it still expressing itself in the education systems that we have today in the world. But as time goes on, we would have a shifting. We have a shifting in how education is practiced in the world. So currently, according to World Economic Forum, we have that the education system that was developed based on the Industrial Revolution model is quite shaky a bit because it's not catering to the changing needs of the society. It's less. The model is mostly on the theoretical aspects, less emphasis on practical or hands-on or skills development. So, according to them, that model, that education system needs to change. Yeah, and so there we have it. The reformers in the education system. In the next edition, we will be talking about the Reformation. And another prominent figure in history, I would say, is Fleming Sword Global Ministry School of Spirits. So they are like new prominent figures whose aim is to reform the education system. You know, ever since man lost that position with God, we've been trying in all our best to find that perfect system that would work. And might I say, achieving that perfect system might not be, I don't want to say possible, but I guess it will be quite difficult in a sense. when Christ comes, before we can actually achieve perfect state in everything that pertains to man. So, yeah, but we can come to a better position, come to arrive at a better education system. Yes, and so there we pause. I took additional 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, but we needed to cover something.